Hello, my name is David Ansara of the Centre for Risk Analysis. We are a think tank based in Johannesburg, and we focus on political risk, economic policy, and scenario planning. And one of the questions that we get very often in our exclusive client briefings is around the issue of prescribed assets and pensions. I'm joined today by two analysts from the CRA team, Nicholas Babaya and Bheki Mahlobo. And I think before we delve into the specifics of this topic, it's very important to situate this within the context of South Africa's ever-growing fiscal crisis, ballooning deficits and debt levels. So I'm going to ask Bheki just to provide some more detail on just the extent to which South Africa is deteriorating in terms of its public financial position.
Thank you, David. What we're seeing emanate from within the ANC cabinet is that they are running out of room, and the government-imposed lockdown has worsened the fiscal condition in South Africa. By the end of this financial year, we're projected to have government revenue of around 1 trillion rand, and about 60% of that 1 trillion rand is eaten up by the public sector wage bill. And if you add to that debt servicing costs, that figure now closely comes to around 70%. We also projected to have around 80% government debt to GDP and a budget deficit of negative 15%, unseen before in South Africa's history. I believe that's why we're seeing a move towards pension funds, as the public finances in South Africa have been severely depleted.
Okay, so that's a very serious situation, and this is necessitating the government to seek out alternative sources of funding. We've had the 70 billion rand emergency relief facility that has come from the IMF, but that only comprises about 10% of the deficit. So, Nicholas, could you explain to our audience just the specifics of the proposals that have been put forward by the ANC, by particular factions, and some of the risks emanating out of this proposal?
Yeah, thanks, David. So what's being proposed recently is something commonly referred to by us as prescribed assets. This is something which has been spoken about in ANC circles for quite a while now, going back a year or two. But now it's being spoken about in the context of the post-COVID-19 recovery. The recent proposal was to create a state-owned bank and to finance and to use the private pension funds of South African citizens to finance that. The reason why that might be a very useful thing for the government to do is that South Africa has a relatively very large pool of pension funds, and up until now, these have largely been out of government hands, unlike tax revenue. As my colleague Bheki mentioned there now, the COVID-19 crisis has to a large extent simply exacerbated the state of public finance. The state of public finance before the crisis was not good in the first place, but this has very much accelerated that. And now the government finds itself, I think, in a position where it can no longer ask for more tax revenue. We've far gone the turning point in the Laffer curve, and now the government needs to find some other source of revenue. And I think the risk here is that in prescribing assets to be used to finance a lot of state-owned companies and infrastructure, we just see a lot more mismanagement that we've already seen in state-owned companies such as Eskom, SAA. Most have had to receive a bailout here and there from government, but the difference now is that there's no more taxpayer money really left to fund this. The risk that we cite here is that at some point, even if this plan does go along without too much of a backlash from the public, and the fact is that at some point pensions will also run out. And at that point, the government only has one more option to deal with the debt, and that is to begin to print the currency. And if we end up in this situation, which is really a worst case scenario, but it is quite similar, at least, to what Zimbabwe looked like in the 1980s, leading up to their hyperinflation starting in the late 90s and really getting exacerbated in the mid-2000s. So we're not down that road as yet, but we advise our clients to be very wary and look out for signs like this. Thanks, David.
Nicholas, I think that's a very important point that you make, and it's also necessary to look at the internal dynamics of the ANC, which is primarily driven by the policy of cadre deployment, which is essentially an elaborate patronage distribution mechanism. State funds are used to buy influence to have leverage within the party, and it essentially is the glue that holds the party together. So as you mentioned, now that tax money is starting to dwindle, the deficit and debt situation is deteriorating, there will be very strong moves made, particularly on South Africa's very large pension pool, which is about 4 trillion rands worth, the largest in Africa and one of the largest in the world. In terms of the politics around it, there has been strong public pushback against this proposal. And what you might see in terms of balance of forces theory, which is a kind of strategy and tactics approach that is often taken by the ANC, is that there might be a strategic retreat or withdrawal from this topic, but Regulation 28 might be quietly amended, and then down the line, pressure is brought to bear on asset managers or insurance companies or other holders of pension funds to invest in strategic assets like state-owned enterprises or infrastructure development. And I think just as a closing remark, a lot has been made around the necessity to develop infrastructure and to spend our way out of the crisis. We think that infrastructure is important, but the quantums of capital, the scale of investments that have been proposed by various business lobbies as well, we also feel is going to be highly onerous. And our view would be to rather focus on policy issues that won't involve huge allocations of capital. So that would be guaranteeing private property rights by removing the discussion around expropriation without compensation. Reforms to the labor market could also be quite easily introduced. And then also restructuring and rethinking the current empowerment framework. That's it from myself, David Ansara, and my colleagues, Nicholas Babaya and Bheki Mahlobo. If you like this content, please do give us a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. But also, if you would like to experience our exclusive client briefings, you're welcome to join the CRA as a client. We have a 30-day free trial currently running. There's a link in the description below, and you're welcome to join us for our webinars and also to benefit from our regular reports and insights. But that's it from me. Until next time, take care.